Hafthor Bjornsson is a 3-time Arnold Classic champion. He has more titles than anybody else in this event in Strongman. Is he the favorite to win? David, is he the favorite to win?
Great to see Rudy only getting stronger as he hits the mid-70s.
He's kind of competing against himself. I think if he wants to rewrite the record books, it's his for the taking.
Actually, a lot of veterans coming back from World War II were pretty instrumental in this Muscle Beach era out on the west coast of the United States. When you think silver era of bodybuilding, what do you think and kind of what comes to your mind? Hey folks, and welcome to Strength Weekly, the weekly show here on the YouTubes that keeps you updated with everything from around the barbell game. For barbend.com, I'm David Thomas Tao, and I'm joined by the incomparable Phil Bleckman. Before we get into the week's top stories, make sure you subscribe to Barbend on YouTube, the very digital platform you're watching right now. We have a massive post-Thanksgiving show for you, just like our gains. Here is the run of show. We have our good friend Rudy Kadlub absolutely keeping the Masters powerlifting division in a headlock and setting some all-time world records along the way. We have the rosters for both the men and women for the Arnold Strongman Classic, and not to be outdone and to put those gains to good use, we are breaking down every historic era of bodybuilding, which is one of the more interesting segments we've ever done. And hey, the research was quite fun. I spent a lot of time on Muscle Beach in my head. Phil Bleckman, how many pounds of lean mass did you gain over Thanksgiving?
My entire body is now post-Thanksgiving lean mass, David. I'm mono lean mass now.
Well, the people on this broadcast can't actually see me from the chest down, but let's just say I went from classic physique to mass monster. That is all I am really going to say. But we're not talking about mass monsters. We're talking about epically strong people. Our good friend Rudy, out of the great Pacific Northwest, absolutely continues his tear. Perhaps the last time we see him compete as a 74-year-old before he takes the 75 to 79 division and absolutely throttles it. Phil, Rudy Kadlub of Kabuki Strength set some all-time world records recently. Give us the breakdown of exactly what he did and why it's historically important.
So actually, two things about his world records. He set 3 world records during his performance. 2 of them were IPL world records. So specifically within the International Powerlifting League, he set a squat record of 217.5 kilograms and a deadlift record of 235 kilograms. But notably, his total of 590 kilograms was the all-time world record across all federations. And that was the goal that he had planned to set out before he even went into the competition. He called that shot before he went in. He executed as expected. Now he has the Masters world record in the 70 to 74 Masters category in the 100 kilogram weight class. And it's very exciting.
Rudy is built different because oftentimes we see powerlifters post big training lifts and they don't quite hit those, or they'll hit, 1 or 2 kilos, within 1 or 2 kilos of what they need to set a record or win a competition. He blasted through that. Let's compare the training lift, if you don't mind, to what he actually did on the platform.
Yeah, in his training lift, he scored 213 kilograms, which was, at the time, his max lift for what he was prepping for to do at least the IPL world record. And he breezes past that by 4.5 kilograms on his final squat. This was, I think, his piece de resistance on his career in this division. And, maybe he had some left in the tank, 217.5 is way more than I think, he had planned to lift, but he called it for the barbell. If you watch his lifts back, which are posted on his Instagram page right now as we speak, it doesn't look like he struggled. The guy's just built different.
Great to see Rudy only getting stronger as he hits the mid-70s. So really excited to see what he's able to do in the next Masters category.
He's kind of competing against himself. I think if he wants to rewrite the record books, it's his for the taking, based on the list that he's doing now. If he goes and he's 75 next year and he just competes at IPL Worlds again and just calls for similar numbers on the bar, he crushes all the world records.
Well, Phil, let's segue because this is something that's going to predict your March 2024, and that is the Arnold Strongman Classic for both the men and women. So the 2024 Arnold Strongman Classic and Strongwoman Classic rosters have been revealed. They are both stacked to the traps is what we're going to say. We have defending champions, historically great competitors, and on both sides, we have some athletes coming back from, I'm not going to say full retirement, but semi-retirement, or at least folks who had taken a step back from the top level competition. They're chomping at the bit to get back to that elite level. We could talk about this for hours. We don't have hours. I am still digesting Thanksgiving dinner, and we'll certainly have to take a nap after this, but we do want to talk about both these divisions. We'll start with the men, then move to the women. Phil, who on the men's side for the 2024 Arnold Strongman Classic roster sticks out to you immediately?
There are some juicy targets. We have defending champion Mitchell Hooper, who is the 2023 World's Strongest Man, the 2023 Rogue Invitational champion. He won the Arnold Classic last year. He's returning to defend that title. He had a couple of injuries throughout the year, but that did not slow him down since. He is the guy to beat. Second, we also have Martins Licis returning again. So Martins has been on this on and off sort of cadence where he competes for 1 year, crushes everything, takes a year off, recovers from injury, comes back, crushes everything. He's going to try and take down Mitchell Hooper. Licis won the Arnold Classic in 2022. 2 champions, back-to-back years. Licis never defended the title. He didn't compete in 2023. So this will be a fun matchup between those two. Okay, let's talk about the big return in Hafthor Bjornsson. Now, Hafthor Bjornsson is a 3-time Arnold Classic champion. He has more titles than anybody else in this event in Strongman. Is he the favorite to win? David? Is he the favorite to win? No,
I don't think he's the favorite to win.
I don't think he's the favorite to win. And I don't think he's the favorite to win, and I don't think it's close. Now, that is not to say that he couldn't podium. Guy's big, guy's still strong. But for Hafthor to come back after losing a ton of weight to go into boxing, then move back into Strongman at 100 kilos less than he was, I expect him to post maybe a 5th or 6th place finish, and that would be great for a comeback. Because even though he'll never compete again at World's Strongest Man, he had a falling out with Giants Live. I would be very surprised if they reconciled that. This will be the biggest show that we see Hafthor return in alongside the Rogue Invitational. If Bjornsson comes back and scores anywhere near the podium, like if he's in the top half of the field, that's exceptional for a return.
He took a couple of years off to beat up Eddie Hall in the boxing ring. He did accomplish that. He beat Eddie Hall pretty soundly, but he also took a little detour after that into powerlifting, ended up getting injured his pec. So not only is he coming back from significant weight loss, switching sports, and by the way, like, kudos to Hafthor. He was a real boxer, right? Mm-hmm. Like he put in the work. He changed his physique. Like he didn't just kind of phone it in and box for a few months. He really took it seriously. I do want to point out, the Arnold Classic is always known for being the realm of static monsters, right? It tends to be the heaviest event in men's open strongman, and it tends to lean toward the guys who are really good at the static events, really heavy kind of standing in place stuff. Let's just put it that way.
Bjornsson's more of a special event here than he is a contender, but if he does perform well here and change the dynamic for what we can expect for the 2024 Rogue Invitational, I think that's really exciting.
Which of the Americans would you give the best shot at making the podium here?
Licis. Licis has this way of, I think, doing strongman really intelligently, where guys that just run show to show to show to show end up slowing down or getting injured in some way because they either burn out from all the travel or, they don't fully recover from, maybe micro tears or other injuries that they suffered during the competition. We saw that with Novikov. Right? He was crushing just like podium. And then lately he's been in the bottom half. He's been getting injured. He got injured at the 2023 World's Strongest Man in his best event. And then since then, he just hasn't posted up numbers. That's not to say that he's not good enough anymore. I think he just never took the time to fully recover because he kept going from event to event.
I would agree with that. Let's move on to the women. Phil, give me a couple names or a few names that stick out to you on the women's side. And we could talk about every competitor on this list, but give me your immediate gut reaction highlights here.
If Victoria Long doesn't win gold, it might be the upset of the year, even though it's happening in the first quarter. You have some absolute haymaker stars here. Olga Liashchuk could crush any event she's in. Angelica Jardine has been showing up pretty well in the last couple of events. Melissa Peacock is usually pretty good in static events. Andrea Thompson and Donna Moore are both former world's strongest women champions, and they could show up at any event and do really well. Andrea Thompson specifically in overhead events could do exceptionally well. So if they do a match log lift or anything like that, that's easy points for Andrea. Lucy Underdown has been deadlifting like an absolute monster recently. Tamara Walcott is coming back in, and she has proven in her powerlifting career to be an exceptional deadlifter. Hannah Lindsay just scored a world record at the Rogue Record Breakers events at the Thor's Hammer. Like, these are hitters. I think Victoria Long just was so dominant last year that anything less than that would be surprising. More so than for the men. For the women, I think the events are going to be really influential as to who's going to be able to score points where.
Let's move on to the world of bodybuilding, because we all just ate way too many calories. And we got to figure out what we're going to do with that, where we're going to put on the mass, and where we're going to have regrets. Don't regret eating holiday meals, folks, as long as you enjoy yourself and, give gratitude for your friends and family, et cetera, et cetera. This isn't therapy. This is bodybuilding. Let's talk about the eras of bodybuilding. Dr. Connor Heffernan, who I believe is one of the world's most prominent, preeminent, and premium strength historians, wrote a great article for Barbell breaking down the historic eras of bodybuilding. Well, let's start with the first era. It's the Bronze Era, which is kind of the development of the first stage of modern bodybuilding. And you could draw a line between the 1890s to the 1920s, and there wasn't a whole lot of differentiation at that time between bodybuilding and other strength sports, right? People lifting weights was kind of one category. Some big figures: Katie Sanduina, Eugene Sandow, and I give those in reverse order because Sanduina got her stage name from Sandow. George Hackenschmidt, if you've ever done a hack squat, you're welcome, but also apologies. Arthur Saxon. These are all big pioneers in the kind of circus era of bodybuilding, but they're really taking it from being kind of a sideshow thing to strength training and weightlifting being a legitimate pursuit. So the Bronze Era of bodybuilding really sets the stage, and there's kind of a bit of a pause because the Bronze Era of bodybuilding goes up to the 20s, and then you don't really have the Silver Era of bodybuilding until the 40s, really post World War II. So you have this period of a couple decades, at least worldwide, where the focus wasn't necessarily on athletic culture, or at least on strength training, because, I don't know, world wars and such. But coming out of World War II, you do see the silver age of bodybuilding develop. And Heffernan, in his article, reflects that actually a lot of veterans coming back from World War II were pretty instrumental in this Muscle Beach era out on the West Coast of the United States. When you think silver era of bodybuilding, what do you think, and kind of what comes to your mind?
I mean, Bill Pearl is I feel like the iconic name for me in that in the roster that we have of that era. The aesthetic really followed culture. It followed pop culture to a big degree. I mean, you got to think at this time, this is also like TV is coming in, cinema is coming in. Like as that stuff gradually evolves, so too does bodybuilding and the clout of which becoming a bodybuilder has. And so as we go into Golden Era and you see the action superstars of these thick bodybuilders that are heavy metal looking rock dudes in action movies, that's different from the sort of picturesque, cover models of the Silver Era. I think bodybuilding is uniquely tied to culture in that way, and it's really, really demonstrative in the sequencing of this, if you look at it.
And that leads us to the Golden Era of bodybuilding, which is from the 60s, arguably to the late 80s, although I've heard it debated as to exactly which time stretch the Golden Era encapsulated. This is where we see bodybuilding in many ways go mainstream, and that is in large part to the movie Pumping Iron, which follows Schwarzenegger, Ferrigno, and Columbu, leading up to the Mr. Olympia contest. And it's the first look that a lot of mainstream audiences get into the bodybuilding lifestyle. Not just what do these folks look like, but what goes into achieving those physiques. You also have concurrently the development of different nutritional supplements, some of the first bodybuilding and strength nutritional supplements coming onto the market. And we got to say it, I don't want to speculate too much. I'm not going to pretend to know the exact stacks these athletes were using, but performance enhancers, not only in bodybuilding, but across sports. This is where you see performance enhancers really become part of certain sports in the Olympic movement, right? You see a lot of state-sponsored doping here.
Yeah, and bodybuilding is now one of the sports where it's of course, all the athletes are enhanced. It's no longer the secret or taboo for bodybuilders to be enhanced athletes. We as a culture have also evolved with that around the sport. I do want to touch on the Golden Era and how you had just talked about them becoming in movies and Pumping Iron and everything like that. There's a well-known interview Arnold Schwarzenegger did, where he has the interviewee feel his bicep, and his bicep is obviously a gigantic mountain peak, and he's like, look at this mountain, look at this bicep, it's unbelievable. And the thing is that it's portrayed as alien, right? It's oh my God, this guy is of another world. This is different than what we can expect from any human person. And that, if you look at it in that lens, even though it's done in an interview on television, is similar to the guys in the circus era with Sandow and Louis Cyr, where it's like they are portrayed as alien figures because they're so strong. They're like the strongmen on the side of the circus, whereas here they're just the strongmen literally live on television. So to this day, we talk about these guys as otherworldly for what they're able to accomplish with their physiques. That's the one through line that has been stayed static all the way through with every era.
Let's move on to the most controversial era in bodybuilding. And I'm going to read a quote from Dr. Heffernan here. The most controversial bodybuilding era is the mass monster era from the late 1980s to 2010. This was a time when bodybuilders pushed the absolute boundaries of muscle gain and, in the view of some individuals, began to sacrifice aesthetics for sheer mass or extreme leanness. This era also coincided with controversies surrounding steroids and other performance-enhancing drugs in sports, culminating in the United States passing the Anabolic Steroid Control Act of 1990, which classified anabolic steroids as a controlled substance and subject to tight government regulations. This led to the one and only drug-tested Mr. Olympia in September 1990, which Lee Haney won. The mass monster era is what I grew up with in bodybuilding. So you have athletes pushing the absolute limits, literally trying to get as wide and massive as possible. A controversial era indeed, and some would say a very dangerous era in bodybuilding history. Phil, what comes to mind for you when you think of the mass monster era?
I look at it now as trying to figure out what the line is for bodybuilding as a whole. We didn't know how far the athletes could take it. I think one of the guys that comes to mind for me in, sort of going up to that line and then coming back is Big Ramy. Big Ramy was known as like the biggest guy on the stage at all times. And he never really found really great success until the past couple of years when he like leaned back down a little bit and like got away from like that far ranging line of like being the biggest possible.
Well, let's talk about the modern era, which Dr. Heffernan defines as kind of 2010 on. It's the current era we're in, obviously, and it's an era that I think will probably change names. We'll look back on this in 40 years and refer to it as something else, but for right now, it's kind of what we're in. And there is a little bit of a dialing back, a movement away from pure mass monsters and more toward aesthetic, balanced, proportional physiques. Part of that coincides with the introduction during this time of new divisions, including classic physique. Chris Bumstead, the Canadian phenom, 5-time defending champion in that category, arguably the biggest name in bodybuilding. You'll also get the introduction of the wellness division, a new women's category that has seen monstrous growth really in only a few years of actually being a division at the highest levels of bodybuilding. It is a step up from bikini. Athletes are allowed to carry a bit more mass, especially in their lower bodies. You do see a lot of athletes moving not only from other bodybuilding divisions, but from other sports. You see a number of powerlifters moving from women's powerlifting over to wellness as kind of an entry point because they don't necessarily get penalized for having more developed lower bodies. The modern era, who are some names that stick out to you, Phil, besides Bumstead, who has really defined the classic physique category? Who are some names that stick out to you that help define the modern era?
I think Breon Ansley really defined what that was. He's a 2-time champion, and his sort of like very clean aesthetics from top to bottom, exquisite posing. He really helped sculpt what that division became. And then Bumstead was second to him a couple of years in a row before taking the mantle and never letting it go. Breon really laid the foundation for the division for Bumstead to then thrive.
Phil, on the men's open side, which bodybuilders for you encapsulate the modern era?
So what we saw for the last handful of years, we saw Big Ramy, who like leaned down. He took two titles in a row. Then we saw Supreme Conditioning take the throne, and Hadi Choopan wins his title. We come back this year, Lunsford, after coming off a silver medal finish in his debut in the Open after moving up from 212. And the difference between him was he has that wide shoulder, very narrow waist. Like his physique flows much smoother, right? From the shoulders down to the X frame. Like he's got that look. Now, does he win on conditioning? Maybe not as close as Hadi, but as we've seen in the last couple of years, they've moved steadily towards Lunsford's look. The thing that jumps out to me is one year, Arnold Schwarzenegger was in the commentary booth at the Olympia, and he was fawning over the classic physique Olympia guys. He was like just enamored by Bumstead's physique. He was like, this is bodybuilding. This is what it should look like. And he was advocating in the booth for classic physique to become the biggest division at the Olympia. It's going towards the bigger classic physique rather than the mass monster. I think we're moving towards a more flowy aesthetic direction. And when we look back, I think like the modern era will be renamed to something like that, like the classic era, you know?
Well, if you want to learn more about every era of bodybuilding, including the one we're currently in, as yet to be named, Beyond the Modern Era, make sure you read the article by Dr. Heffernan, and you can do that by going to barbend.com or clicking on the link in the description below. Super, super easy. We want to make it smooth for you, like Derek Lunsford's physique, as Phil would say. Well, folks, I hope you had a lovely holiday with friends, family, or alone, avoiding both of those groups of people. Until then, for Strength Weekly, I'm David Thomas Tao, joined by
Phil Blackman of barbend.com. Thank you guys so much for joining us on our post-Thanksgiving episode. We hope you enjoyed, and we will catch you next time.
Still feeling full, folks.